This is just one example. There are more, and they are all over the world. If mankind was creating some kind of lie about his origins, then he was doing so on a grand scale, and our modern historians are ignoring their ancestors' explanations that aliens came, took control, and took over our minds. The fact is this: ancient artifacts across the world reveal non-human intelligent creatures at the hands of machines and weapons and superior to the ordinary human beings below them. Historians know this, and yet they themselves create fanciful explanations that simply do not explain this whole story. Align the texts with the artifacts, and add into this the altered state humans experience, and we have but one conclusion. We were invaded, and we are right now, to this very day, being controlled by descendants of the invaders. We are under the yoke of a hybrid species of alien beings who rule the world. The whole picture is not taken into account at all. There is absolutely no explanation why cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years all come up with the same cultural origins of extraterrestrial, superhuman beings that all look and act the same. Beings from another reality. Super weapons, superpowers, the ability to change shape, the serpentine reptilian appearance, the creation of civilization, the teaching of humanity, the erection of huge structures, the sudden knowledge of mankind, the forming of religions with deities and divine beings, and the forming of a line of special hybrid kings and queens. All of this is factual and worldwide. It is in every single culture and country, and it all supposedly happened separately. The truth is that these early historians were recording history, not creating myths. And so, as time passed, mankind continued to do the bidding of the masters. They went to the temple or church and worshipped the ancient aliens depicted in light as great benefactors of humanity. Ever wondered why the God of the Bible sometimes appears too human? Why he is a jealous God? Why he is lonely? Why he wipes out entire armies with his...
Tackling climate change and providing energy isn't an either-or. We have to do both.
Super weapons? The answer is simple. The gods of ancient times were all those things. They too have jealousy, hatred, love, compassion, because they too evolved in the universe like us. But they are the fittest of the species, and we are not. We are the prisoners, and they are the guards. Now you know the answer to that question of why God does the things he does, if he truly is a loving God. As the years passed and the hybrid species ruled the lands, things changed. Civilizations grew, and one state battled another. Why, we cannot truly say, but the same families were always behind the decisions on both sides. Maybe it was some kind of sport, playing with humanity, having a laugh. Who can say? Any explanation for warfare with fellow human beings is insane, and yet the world is a big stage, and in order to achieve the long-term goal of the secret cabal that sits behind the scenes, things must move at a certain pace. The goal is simple and straightforward. It is obvious from all the recorded history we have. It is to create a single, one world government that rules without question. History reveals that the thousands of different states and countries have taken time to form together into ever increasingly larger states and countries or groups, European unions, federations, African unions, and more. It has taken the threat of more warfare and bloodshed to overcome the darker elements of our own psychologies to get to this state. The fear of more death is a strong force. But it has not always been warfare that has worked. After each and every financial crash, humans have come together and insisted on stronger bonds and more union. All of this centralizes the power even more into one place. The results of just two methods of control are the formation of a one-world army under the United Nations to carry out the will of the secretive elite, and a World Bank to control the finances of the same. Such power is wielded here that nobody dare rise against it. And all along, the same families are behind the entire scheme. The same families that sit on thrones in glorious palaces, and are still worshipped as gods, and are still given authority by the created religions. These are the same families that the fleeting politicians, who only have a set amount of time in office, court. The Queen of England and the Commonwealth is just one example. Her bloodline can be traced back thousands of years to the very original times of the Watchers and Shining Ones. Her bloodline is special because it is a hybrid bloodline, carefully monitored and interbred with members of the same hybrid descendants to this day. Every week, the elected Prime Minister of the nation must go and hold a secret meeting with the monarch to pass on information, take advice, and discuss the work of the Secret Service. Nothing can happen without royal assent. She is the richest person on the planet, with more accumulated wealth than even Apple. Her power stretches around the world and is linked by blood to the majority of royals in Europe and elsewhere. The government of the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and others are her governments. She has authority to rule as the divine leader because God says so through her church, which she heads. All of this is very simple to prove and reveal. What is not so simple, but nevertheless true, is that the hidden governments of so-called republics are themselves led by the same elite bloodlines. Presidents come and go as heads of state, being elected and deselected. Royalty passes on authority to their own offspring. However, presidents and leaders of republics only ever get elected when they have been chosen by the secret cabal. They are bribed and blackmailed to do as they are told. Anybody steps out of line and they are removed, one way or another. The real governments are the civil servants who work behind the scenes advising so-called elected members. These are permanent members of the government, and these are almost always following in their parents' footsteps. They go to the same universities where they are monitored, manipulated and controlled. They become part of the elite. They join secret societies where they are made to feel special, chosen, powerful, and they do their master's bidding. This is how the hybrid men behind the scenes control the world. And it is not just in government. The same bloodlines are also found in religions and in commerce. Take a look at the secret meetings such as the Bilderberg meeting. Powerful individuals coming together from across the world to decide on the future of the world. They come from government, commerce, religion, science, and royalty. Who chooses? Who decides on what is to be discussed? Why, each year, are there people that actually become world leaders years later? Because it is all part of the massively powerful secret cabal that runs the world. You may not believe they can hold such power, that you elect your government, but the facts are...
I look back upon my time, see the snapshots of my...
Facts are simple. All of the media which influences your decisions is owned by the same people. The same people own both sides of the political world, whether red or blue. They select their future leaders while still at university. They grow them, manipulate them. They then decide what they need to happen and who needs to be in power at any one time, and manipulate the media to convince us. Ever watch the news and screamed at it because you know that they are not telling you the whole truth? Why are we being so calm about immigration, you may shout? Why are we not invading the Middle East and stopping all the nonsense? Why do we let China get away with massive human rights crimes? The list is endless, but the answer is the same. The news channels are controlled by the elite. We are watching nothing but permanent propaganda. It permeates everything. News, soap operas, films, magazines, music, and the internet. All is controlled. In ancient Egypt, the pharaohs created grand works to keep the massive populations controlled and busy. They knew that a bored mind wanders, and they simply did not want their people to wander and wonder too much. The same is true today. In the times before ordinary humans could read, the Christians placed stained-glass windows and murals in their churches to show the people what they needed to believe in. Using repetitive chants and songs, they rammed the message home. The same is true today. Pretty films and games entertain us, but also subtly manipulate our minds into believing what they want us to believe. We all know this to be true. Look back at the films created during and after the Second World War, and it is now blatantly obvious that these were propaganda films. In the 1950s and 60s, more German-friendly films were made to slowly adjust us back again. They even gave Elvis a few German lines to sing in order to soften us back up again against the hatred they had previously inspired. All along, you and I are blinded by the marketing and propaganda. It used to be that we were told what to believe, or we'd be hung and then go to hell. Now they threaten us with financial crises or terrorism that they create, foster and build. The Middle East is a perfect example because it is a playground to be used by the secret cabal to control world events. It has been for a very long time. The infamous hero Lawrence of Arabia was murdered by the Secret Service because he knew and was going to reveal it to the world. As things stand, the secret services of the West have been undermining the power structure of the Middle East for some time. They claim the moral high ground because they claim to have a thing called democracy. And yet, the leaders they have been toppling are the leaders they previously put into power. What they have been doing is dividing nations, creating threatening factions that war against each other and us. This works beautifully on many levels. It sells more arms. It creates a scared public who look at terrorists as a threat and not their own government. That's an ancient tactic. It weakens all the countries involved, allowing the glorious West to come in and save the day, set up their own puppet governments, and insist that yet more union is required. The Middle East has been one of those sticking points in the grand scheme. It has refused to unite because of religious and cultural divisions. Europe, Africa, America, Australasia, and even the East have all been coming together, forming unions and joining the World Trade Organization, UN, and other one world governing bodies. The Middle East has been getting too cocky and needed smashing apart to rebuild. This has been done again and again throughout history. The First World War was a prime example of how a continent was ripped apart and then glued back together again in a different form. What disappeared were the royals who refused to toe the line, and several countries reformed. A League of Nations emerged as a precursor of the United Nations, and part of the One World War Revolution was complete. They did the same thing again a few years later, and smashed apart several other empires that needed to be brought into line. Any nation that gets too strange, or appears to do so, is smashed, one way or another. Strength and prosperity is therefore seen only by joining with the one. The Middle Eastern crisis, as it stands, is part of the process of bringing them into line. The collateral damage of millions of lives is not an issue the cabal have ever concerned themselves with. Loving gods indeed. But despair not, for there is actually more to the story. Although we cannot see the entities we are describing without altering our vision, they are there, and there are opposing forces at work. We see everything around us because of a very small part of the wave spectrum. We call it light, but there are many kinds of light, and we only see a slither. Outside of that minor part of the spectrum, there are other things we cannot see. Over thousands of years, there have been millions of people that have seen beyond our normal spectrum, and they have witnessed these other beings. One large group who did so were the ancient shaman. Through the use of drugs and mind-altering techniques, they witnessed the beings all around them, and they left records for us. To simplify, what they told us was that there were good beings and bad beings, and one side waged against the other. Today, there are many mediums who claim the same thing. However, our ancestors told us precisely what had happened. The Shining Ones came down. They set up the Watchers to control humans and foster civilization. But some of these Watchers didn't like what they were doing, and actually fell in love with humans and mated with them. The Shining Ones declared war on these Watchers and tried to wipe them out. The bad hybrid species. They caused a global flood. Ever since then, the angels have done battle with the demons, the bad with the good. And we have often witnessed these things, painted them, drawn them, and written down records. These are records left behind by people such as Enoch, and remarkably, the same things spoken of thousands of years ago are still being witnessed today. Benevolent beings saving humans from disaster, battles in the sky, a war between those that would control us and those that would set us free. The reason we don't see all these things and find crashed craft or dead bodies everywhere is simple. Your mobile phone signal is yours. The person next to you can also talk on their phone at the same time. The conversations do not cross or get mixed up. One does not hear the other, and yet they coexist. The same is true here. What mystics are seeing are beings of different light in a different dimension. What people who are in the hypnagogic state, or between waking and sleeping, are seeing is another world, existing in the same place, in space and time as our own. One is attempting to control the other, and very often steps across the boundary. Beings from that other place actually crossed over to our dimension thousands of years ago and took control. They have been manipulating us ever since through their hybrid children. The jealousy of the god was that he wanted control and would never relinquish it. But there are angels of light that fight back, and the whole myth has become so mixed up now that it is confusing. The Freemasons are accused of worshipping the devil because they actually hold Lucifer in high esteem. Lucifer means light, not darkness. Things, as Salvador Dali once said, are not always what they seem. But the big question is this: why? What do these beings need so much that they need to control us, to cause division, hatred? The answer comes in another question. What feeds wave? There can be no life without a wave form. It is life. When a wave stops, so does life. But it must be fed. It must have energy. To get a light bulb to glow, to emit its light waveform, it must be energized. It has to be fed. Over billions of years, life on planet Earth evolved out of chaos. There were volcanoes, earthquakes, storms, and eventually it all settled down after having created the optimum place for life to exist. Millions of years later, here we are, but alongside of us, something else evolved, something we cannot see with our ordinary eyes. As beings of light and parts of a spectrum we cannot see, did not have the capacity to eat physical food, to feed its own light bulb from plants and animals. Instead, it evolved needing energy. We feed these entities with our hatred, greed, and desires. Without war, they starve. In peace, they perish. This is why the old hag of our dreams paralyzes us, because she is sapping our energy of fear. This is why alien abductees cannot move, because they are having the life force of the wave extracted. This is why we humans are constantly manipulated to battle and hate each other. We are creating food for the demons of the other world, and we must stop. We must stop now playing the game they want us to play and seek peace with each other regardless of the reasons. The reasons for our hatred are those created by the elite secret cabal in order to create hatred. Hatred of one religion or another is a prime example. There are no religions. They are created. They are imaginary. The differences between humans and their religions is a farce, and yet it has been used to foster huge hatred energy. Often conspiracy theorists want to fight the system to break the power of the elite, but the answer to the problem is more subtle than simply feeding back into the system of hatred. The answer is not being part of the system. The system is very simple and yet hard to see. It involves every element of our lives. What we eat is controlled. We are told what to eat, when and where to eat it. The food itself is often garbage. We are guinea pigs on a massive meat-eating locust machine. We buy a hot dog because we've seen the stars eat them in the movies, and it's somehow cool. That hot dog is made up of the leftovers of several different animals swept up off the floor, turned into a watery pulp, and ejected into a plastic bag. It's carcinogenic. It causes cancer. It has been proven to increase cancer. We pour chemicals all over it that taste nice and wash it down with a chemical cancer-inducing soda. It is not natural. And that is the answer here. If it is not natural, then it is not good. If man has had his hand in it, then watch out. It's part of the system. This same premise can be rolled out to the rest of our lives with drugs, clothing, housing, finance, everything. Almost everything is part of the system, feeding the system. Stepping out of the system and peacefully going back into nature takes us back to a time when our history reveals we were a peaceful species before they came and revealed themselves to us. Before war began, before we started eating meat, before we became jealous of others and hatred set in, before we were controlled and were one with the nature around us.